Good afternoon. This is Dr. Kay Rainford. Welcome to week 4. If we were doing this as a Zoom meeting, I would ask a few questions. How is it going? Are you getting the information you need in discussion? Are you feeling prepared to write your draft? Are you getting the feedback you need from your peers? How about the assignments? Are you ready to go forward and turn those in at the end of the week with your revisions from the feedback you got? And how about the instructor feedback? Are you getting information you need to improve week upon week and feel competent in the class? So let me know. I'm always anxious to hear whatever I can do to make this class really stellar for you. Here's my sense of what I'm seeing in terms of progress. It's week 4 and you're starting to settle in. You really understand what the weekly process looks like. You know you've set up your own process for going out and doing the research that you need to do and getting started with your writing and getting those drafts out there. I'm seeing more nuanced feedback between peers. And what that means to me is that you better understand what it is that you can say that would be a better suggestion for your peers. I'm also seeing more skill at paraphrasing and citing, especially the PMBOK guide. And in terms of the PMBOK guide, I'm seeing very brief citations, just that nugget of information that you need that's really critical about either the purpose of a particular process or about what to expect in that process. And then I'm seeing you move on to that to discussion, analysis, and application, where you apply from your scenario a particular example that really brings your whole scenario alive and really makes that connection for your reader between your particular scenario and the project management theory. So one thing that I do see every now and then, I'll see a paragraph and it will say, at XYZ company, theory. And so I'm getting the information about, you're saying that there are documents, you tell me that there are EEFs and OPAs, but you don't tell me what they are specifically and why that particular document was super important. So anytime you look at one of your paragraphs and the only scenario information that you see is XYZ company, you should try to get a little bit more specific. On the other hand, if you see a paragraph that you're writing and there's no theory, it's 100% scenario, make sure that you go back and tell your reader, how does what you're telling us about this scenario really relate to a particular part of the project management theory? And who is the source for that theory? So, and really, I see very little of that going on. I see that most of the time, every paragraph has the theory, it's got the source cited, and it has a very specific explanation of how you applied that to your scenario. And that's the point that we really want to be at by week 8. And one thing that you can do to really sensitize yourself to this concept is to look at one of your peers' papers and in every paragraph say, does this peer have information about the theory? Is it clear what they're doing? And is there clear information about how it applies specifically to the scenario? And do that paragraph by paragraph, and I guarantee it will make you very sensitized to it, and you'll be able to write more effectively. And you'll be helping out your peers by pointing this out to them. So what are we doing in week 4? We have 2 knowledge areas this week. The first one is resources, which is all of the Chapter 9 processes. And there's both a discussion and assignment, as usual. And then we also ask you to do communications this week, all of the Chapter 10 processes. And then there's a workshop for MS Project, and that is the second of 2 discussions on MS Project. So the draft that you'll produce and the assignment will focus in on project resource management and communications. And the skills you should really work on this week to demonstrate are using 2 or more external sources effectively in each section of your paper, not just one, and not just one per week, and also producing a complete and accurate MS Project schedule. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So what do you need to know about resource management? Just a heads up that the PMBOK Guide 6th edition did change its approach to resources. It used to be simply human resources, and now it's also got some information in there about all of the other resources, materials, fixed resources, etc. And all work or effort is some kind of a resource. And I realize that not all organizations do time chargeback on their projects, where each team member has to report back how many hours they spent each week. And especially that's not true of volunteers or just employees doing their job that results in a project being completed. But it's very critical that you actually assign a cost to those efforts, to those resources. When I worked at, for example, Thomson Reuters in portfolio management, we had to produce basically a comparison, an apples to apples comparison between dozens of different projects. And if we had left out the effort that people would do in producing that, even though they were lawyers and all they did was look at contracts, for example, or they were developers and all they did was write code. If we had left out the effort that each one of those people in those organizations was planning to do, we would have had no way of effectively comparing one project to another in terms of ROI. So the way that we worked it is we used one standard rate for any effort. So whether it was the CEO or whether it was a temp pushing some papers around, we used $50 per hour for any hour of effort. And it was amazing what it gave us in terms of comparison between projects and in terms of the real true cost of doing a project within an organization versus not doing it. Finally, the other part of resource management is developing teams. And there is some really great literature out in the, especially research-based literature in the St. Mary's Library on developing teams. So communications management, it's just my least favorite area to read. And I used to think that was just because I was a poor communicator, but I think there's more to it than that. I think it's the way that students in the capstone are using the communications. It gets very stuck in the PMBOK guide. And this is an area where you should be out of the PMBOK guide and really looking at that abundance of external sources that you could use. This is a place where you can tell a story. You can talk about conflicts between people and gaps in communications that cause project delays or that caused things to go differently than you expected. You can look into a lot of the research on virtual teams and what the best practices are for handling that. So for sure, use at least 2 external resources. And I'm just going to say this, the thing I hate most are calculating the number of communication paths. And the reason that I dislike it is not because I don't think that it's a smart thing to do. It's because people just say, I have 256 communication paths, but they forget to tell me, so in my particular project, what that meant was that we put these things in place to make sure that we could deal with the complexity, because we consider anything over 100 communication paths to be an extremely complex project, for example. So it's taking the information about what you know and explaining what you did, and then further explaining, so how did that work out for you? That's what I'm looking for in general, but especially in communications. Help me out here. Okay, moving along. This week, week 4, we have an MS project workshop. It's due in week 4. It's worth 20 points. And this last week, you gave us a schedule. You did your dependencies. You got all of your tasks in there, your milestones. And this week, you're going to be focusing on assigning resources to those tasks, calculating costs, leveling resources, and absolutely giving feedback and assistance to your peers. Well, the skill that you're actually going to be demonstrating this week is putting together a complete and accurate MS project file. And I cannot say enough about how the videos available from our program director, Bill Johnson, are helpful in this. I know that it can take you hours to listen to them, but I also think that because it's been so long since you had 601, this might not be the worst way to spend a couple hours of your time. One of the things that you'll find is that when you deal with effort and add some of those resources in, that it goofs around with your critical path. So make sure that you go back and make sure your critical path is displayed accurately. Try to get up to the appropriate number of lines, but if you don't, I don't think that's a big deal. Bill Johnson probably disagrees with me, so but we do overall have people from external to our organization. It's not just me looking at this. Papers and MS project files from our capstone classes are randomly drawn to figure out how to assess our program, whether we're teaching what we hope to be teaching, and whether you're really learning it. So I guess it's not just me looking at the number of lines, but I don't think it's going to impact your grade from me. In terms of cost, make sure that you have both work and material and fixed costs, and that they're accurately incorporated so that they show up in the right place. Remember that that budgets are supposed to be phased, and make sure that your schedule and your budgets are in alignment with your project documents. Really, after you finish your MS project schedule for that file this week and you get feedback from your peers, you have to make a decision. Do you want to just turn it in now and be done with it so that you don't have to deal with it? Or would you like to wait until later on, sometime before the Friday of week 8, which is the day that it's due? So some people do turn it in early. That's because they expect to have very few changes in their costs and their schedule that will get their paper and their project schedule out of alignment. Some people wait till later just to make sure that everything ties out. Entirely up to you. So that's it. That's what I have to say about week 4. If you have questions, make sure that you either post them on the Ask the Instructor forum in each week. That's a quick way to get an answer. Another thing is to look in the resources area, which is below week 8. That wiki has all of the answers from questions people have asked in previous capstones. And finally, email or text your instructor because we definitely want to be available for you. That's it for week 4. Let me know. I'm looking forward to seeing you online. Bye now.